Hi, everybody. This is Steve Stearns from OutsideHealthAndFitness.com. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Outside Health and Fitness Podcast. If you're new to the show, we like to stay fit and active by having fun outside. We like to ride, slide, run, walk, hike, bike, golf, golf, swim, and ski. If it's fun outside and it keeps us healthy, we love it. So if you're like us and you want to be healthy, active, and have fun outside, then you found the right place. I'm doing something a little different this week. I'm doing the show live on Google Hangouts. And the reason I'm doing that is that for multiple reasons, but one is it gives you a chance to watch the show as a video or listen as a podcast. So you can take the show any way you want to take the show. I'd also like to get you on the show in the future to join me in the chat room or even live. So if you are already getting the free newsletter every week, I'll be making announcements about future shows there. And if you aren't getting the free newsletter, make sure you stop by OutsideHealthAndFitness.com/102 and sign up. So in this episode, what we're talking about is we're going to share some backcountry trail tips. I got 5 really great tips that you can use for your next backcountry adventure. We're going to talk about how to maximize that limited pack space that you have before your trip, how to figure out where you are using just a compass and a map, how to estimate how much daylight you have left, and finally, how to stay warm at night in the backcountry. Now, on last week's episode, I spoke with Mario Caleo, and he told us about his survival of this near-death experience, and that set him on this path to lose 120 pounds. It was an inspirational story, and if you missed that episode, I'll have a link in today's show notes at OutsideHealthAndFitness.com/102. Just click on the last week link, and you can get all caught up. All right, so let's get right to this. I'm going to work on a little screen share here so that we can follow along with some of the different tips. So give me just a moment. Hitting the screen share now. And the button. Whoops. There we go. All right. So if you are watching, you should be able to see the first part of my slide here. Okay, so let's get right into 5 backcountry trail tips. So the first one is we talked about this idea of maximizing pack space, and the 3 things that you really want to think about when you're getting ready to go is weight distribution, accessibility, and space. So you do have a limited amount of space, and if you're like me, you pretty much fill the whole thing up. But there's some things that you can do to maximize that space and also make your trip more comfortable. The first is that weight distribution. What you want to do is get those heavy items on the bottom of your pack or near the bottom so that most of the weight is distributed onto your hips. So we're talking about things like your tent or your sleeping bag, those things that weigh the most. Then the mid-weight items, maybe like your food or your cooking utensils, that sort of stuff, can be in the middle, and then your lighter stuff on top, and that's your clothing, those sorts of things. Another thing you can do for weight distribution that I find to be pretty nifty is I did a review of this thing called the Ribs Front Pack, and it's just a pack that you put on, and it works with your backpack to give you more pockets and different things up front, so you can kind of distribute your weight a little bit more evenly between back and front, and it makes things a lot more accessible, which is our next point, accessibility. When you pack, if you use stuff sacks and compression sacks, it's a great way to keep your pack organized and keep things much more accessible because you've got all of your food in one stuff sack, all your clothes in a stuff sack, and you're just pulling out 2 or 3 things rather than 30 things from your pack. Also helps you maximize space better because you can fit things in and around those stuff sacks. I'm going to have a video in the show notes at OutsideHealthAndFitness.com/102, and it's a great video that I found from what was the name of it? Oh, Backcountry Edge. And it shows some of these best practices for packing your pack and really maximizing the space. So I'd encourage you to go over there and check that out. It's a great video. So the next thing is, this is a really cool tip that I found for just organizing your outfits out on the trail. So you can roll your t-shirt, underwear, and socks all together into one compact little unit. And it's very easy to do. You take your t-shirt, lay it down on the bed or the floor, put your underwear on the t-shirt, and then just fold the arms of the t-shirt over the underwear. So you have like this long rectangle shape with your t-shirt. You take your socks, you put the toe down on the t-shirt and then the toe of the other sock on the t-shirt so that both of the open ends are sticking out, and then you roll the whole thing up. Then you just fold the socks over the roll and you have a tight, self-contained little clothing roll that can go right in your pack. It's another great way to maximize space and stay organized out on the trail. So this is a very important tip. This is triangulating your position. Sounds very complicated, but it's really easy. If you've ever been in the backcountry and you've gotten a little off the trail, you're not exactly sure where you are on the trail, this is a great way to figure that out. All you need to do is look for a couple of prominent structures. So maybe it's like a ledge or a lake or a river or a mountain, something like that. You want a couple of those that are about 60 degrees or further apart. And you just take a bearing on the first one with your compass and you draw a little line on the map along that bearing line. Then you do the same thing for the second structure, and where those two lines intersect, that's where you are. So it's a really easy, nifty way to figure out exactly where you are on the trail or off the trail. This is a really cool tip. It's about estimating daylight. When you're out, particularly if you're going to be spending the night in the backcountry and you need to make camp, you know how important it is to save yourself enough time to do that in the daylight. If you've ever set up camp at night, you know that that is not a fun thing to do. So this lets you estimate how much time you have left before the sun goes down. And it's really easy. All you do is you hold your hand up to the sun and the horizon and just take a take a measurement. Each finger on your hand is worth about 15 minutes. So if your hand fits between the sun and the horizon, you have about an hour before the sun goes down. Two hands, you have about 2 hours. So it's a great way to know when to stop and set up your camp for the night. Only time that this doesn't work is on the north and south poles. It just doesn't work there. But if you are there, hopefully you've got some pretty sophisticated equipment, and you probably want to keep your hand in a glove anyway. It's pretty cold. Okay, so speaking about cold, let's talk about sleeping warm in the backcountry. One thing that's really important about sleeping warm is to keep your head covered. Keep a hat on or use a mummy bag that has one of those hoods, because the majority of our heat escapes our body through our head. So keeping a hat on or keeping your head inside of the mummy bag is going to trap in your body heat and make you much more comfortable. In fact, sometimes I have a mummy bag. Sometimes I have to take my head out of the mummy bag, even when it's cold outside, because I'm just so warm. It really works well. On the other end of the spectrum, you also want to have socks on your feet that'll keep your feet warm. Take a pair of socks with you that are specifically for sleeping only. So you're not wearing them on the trail. You're not getting them sweaty and all that stuff. They're warm, dry, and just for sleeping. Not too tight either, because you want to keep your circulation. Next thing is shake out your sleeping bag before you lay it down in the tent. It's been in a compression sack all day, or it's been packed in your pack, and chances are the loft and the insulation in there isn't evenly distributed. So just kind of shaking that out redistributes that, so you have a much more comfortable sleeping experience. This is a big one, and that is stay off the ground. And you want to have one of those sleeping pads in your pack with you. One, it's a little more comfortable, but the big thing is the ground can really sap your body heat and make things very cold. So having that little layer of insulation between you and the ground is critically important to stay warm. Keep your mouth and nose outside of your sleeping bag. And you'll notice this in the morning when you wake up, the inside of your tent will have some condensation. That's from you breathing. And if you have your mouth or your nose inside your sleeping bag, you're going to trap that condensation in there, and you're going to wake up in a wet, moist, and not so warm environment. So make sure you keep your mouth and your nose outside of the sleeping bag. And finally, wear polypro at night, because you may have this inclination to bundle up, but that is not as warm as just wearing your polypro, because the body heat is going to radiate, through your polypro in that light environment in your sleeping bag, and you're going to be much warmer in the morning. So here's a bonus tip, and this is about building a campfire. Obviously, a very important thing if you're going to be spending the night out in the backcountry, particularly if it's a little bit chillier. And the first tip here is, and this is a mistake that a lot of people make, is gather all of your wood before you start the fire. A lot of times you'll see somebody start a fire and they don't have any wood to feed the fire. They got to run around and try to gather that up, and at that point your fire could go out. So make sure you do some good prep work ahead of time. And here's a good way to remember and to organize what you need to get the fire going. The first thing is you're going to need tinder, and it's going to be about the thickness of the tip of a pencil. So the stuff that you're looking for here is little twigs that you're finding on the ground, maybe pine needles, maybe birch bark, that kind of stuff. And you're just going to gather that up. Well, how much do you get? If you take your hand or your hands and you put them together and make a little circle, that is about as much tinder as you're going to need. So you gather up that much and set that over by where you're going to get your fire started. The length of these pieces should be, if you outstretch your hand, should go from your tip of your thumb to the tip of your pinky. That would be a good length for tinder. Now, in all these instances, too, we should say that you're looking for dry wood. So snapping the branch off of a live tree isn't going to help you out. You want to look for wood that's fallen and dead and on the floor of the forest. So the next thing you're looking for is kindling. So this should be about the thickness of your thumb, and you should gather as much as you can fit. If you take your arms and make a circle now, so before we made a circle with our hands, take your arms, make a circle. That's how much kindling you want. And it should be about as long as the distance from your elbow to your fingertips. You're going to gather up as much of that as you can, and bring that over by where you're going to build your fire. The final thing is your fuel, your wood. So this should be at least as thick as your wrist or bigger, and as long as your armpit to your fingertip. So these are pretty long pieces of wood, and you want to pile them as high as your knee. So you're going to get quite a bit of wood gathered here before you get started. So when you start, what you do is you take that tinder that we gathered and you're going to bend it into a teepee shape. And then underneath, if you get, birch bark is great. If you're in an area where you can find some birch bark, that really gets things going well. It's got some good oils in it and stuff. You could slide some of that underneath that teepee and light that and get that going. Now, as the tinder starts to go, the next step is take the kindling and lean it over the fire in a teepee pattern, and make sure you leave enough space for air to get in so the fire can really start taking off. At that point, once the kindling is going and catching, then you start laying on your bigger pieces in that same teepee fashion until the fire is really, really going well. And that's how you can keep warm. Now, it's really important to check those fire warnings when you're out in the backcountry. If it's if they have a high fire warning, you absolutely do not want to be building a fire out there. And no matter what, always make sure that you drown the fire well. You'd be surprised, in the morning you wake up, there are still warm coals under there. So you want to drown it with water, stir the whole thing up so you can see some more coals, drown it again, make sure it's really out before you break camp and take off for the day. So those are our 5+1 bonus, I guess, backcountry trail tips. And I'm going to have links to the videos and some of the other things. And if you want this presentation as a PDF download, I'll have that, excuse me, in the show notes as well, over at outsidehealthandfitness.com/102. So let me, I'm sorry, let me stop sharing here for 1 second. Maybe. Okay, and we did. So I want to thank you again for listening to the show and being part of the Outside Health and Fitness community. If you're getting value from the show and you'd like to help me bring you more shows like this, you can just visit the show notes for today's show at outsidehealthandfitness.com/102. Click on the support tab. And don't forget to sign up for the free weekly newsletter over there. We send out exclusive outside health and fitness articles, resources, and I'll keep you posted for more live shows like this one. Thanks again for listening to the show, and I will see you outside.